Hello, friends. Before we dive into this journey through history, do me a quick favor. If you love dramatic, unbelievable, and little-known twists of fate, where every step is a life or death choice, then hit that subscribe button and the bell. Our channel is your personal portal to the past, where we dissect stories like this one down to the bone. And at the end of this video, I'll be waiting for your comments. Tell us which other battle you'd like us to explore in the same gripping format. Your voice shapes our content. Now let's begin. Ready? Here we go. Hot, humid jungles of the Philippine Islands. It's October of 1944. On the scorching sands of a beach on Leyte Island, knee-deep in seawater, walks a tall man wearing a crumpled cap and his ever-present corncob pipe clenched between his teeth. Water sloshes over the tops of his high boots, but he couldn't care less. He has just stepped off an assault landing craft, and he's keeping a promise. A promise made 2.5 years earlier, when he was evacuated from these very islands under a hailstorm of Japanese shells. Back in '42, General Douglas MacArthur had gritted his teeth and uttered words that would become legendary long before any cyborg ever said them. "I shall return." And he did, on the 20th of October. That famous line, "I'll be back," isn't about Arnold Schwarzenegger, my friends. It's about him, about the stubborn, ambitious, and at times theatrical General MacArthur, who swore to wrest the Philippines back from the Japanese. And now he's here. But this isn't the end of the story. It's merely the beginning of a long, bloody, and brutally savage road toward the heart of the archipelago, the city of Manila. And along that path, his army wouldn't just face infantry entrenched in foxholes. They would confront Japan's last, desperate armored armada in the Pacific. This isn't merely a tale of a single battle. It's the story of the final gasp of the rising sun's armored might. A story where steel burned and human resolve reached its darkest extremes. To grasp the full scale of tragedy and fury unleashed across these islands, let's take a step back. The Philippines, the pearl of Southeast Asia. 7,000 islands. The year is 41. Japan, intoxicated by dreams of its greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, swiftly kicks out the Americans with a single blow. The fall was humiliating and rapid for both the United States and General MacArthur personally. The Philippines became a deep, festering wound, strategically and symbolically. Without them, control over Pacific sea lanes remained illusory. Their recapture became not just a military necessity but a matter of prestige. Meanwhile, by 1944, the Philippines had transformed for Japan from a trophy into a trap. Cut off from the homeland by the American fleet, starved of supplies, yet still receiving orders from Tokyo to fight to the death. And so, into this very trap, knowing full well it had already snapped shut, Japanese command dispatched its 2nd Tank Division under General Iwanaka Yoshihara. Picture this scene. Nearly 200 tanks loaded onto transports and shipped across an ocean swarming with American submarines, heading toward an archipelago already doomed. It was like sending a costly but obsolete tool straight to certain destruction. Most of these machines were Type 97 Chiha medium tanks, equipped with a reasonably effective 47mm gun early in the war. But by '44, compared to Soviet T-34s, German Panthers, and American Shermans, they were hopelessly outdated. Their armor was only 25mm thick at its strongest point, barely more than tin foil for their crews. Even modest-caliber shells punched clean through, turning each tank's interior into a hell's cape of white-hot shrapnel. Overseeing this doomed campaign was a man who, unlike many fanatics in Tokyo, saw things clearly: General Tomoyuki Yamashita, the Tiger of Malaya, the very commander who crushed the British in Singapore within weeks back in '41. He understood perfectly well. Victory in open battle was impossible. America would unleash its full industrial might: aircraft, warships, artillery, fresh divisions. His plan was simple and grim: not victory, but delay. Exhaust the enemy, dig into the mountainous regions of Luzon, the main island, and turn them into an impregnable fortress where every cave would have to be scorched with flamethrowers. But that required time. And the tanks? The tanks were mere bargaining chips in this game. Their mission: counterattack, inflict damage, slow the American advance toward those mountains, and then simply be written off. The lives of their crews, those iron boxes, they were all expendable in this grand operation to buy time. And so, on the 9th of January 1945, the prelude to the main drama began. The Americans landed in Lingayen Gulf on Luzon. The beachhead was secured. Yamashita immediately threw his 7th Tank Regiment into its first counterattack. It was a suicide order, and everyone knew it. On the 16th of January, a company of tanks and an infantry battalion advanced under cover of night. But American reconnaissance never slept. Instead of facing tanks, they encountered well-camouflaged anti-tank guns. This wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. Steel-clad samurai burned one after another, blinded by muzzle flashes in the darkness. By dawn, the Shermans arrived. They found the regiment's main force in the town of Urdaneta, and there unfolded one of those rare episodes later immortalized in textbooks. A single Japanese tank platoon, just 3 vehicles, managed to seize a favorable position. They succeeded in setting 2 Shermans ablaze. Imagine the emotions of those Japanese tankers. In their obsolete Chihas, they'd actually knocked out mighty American machines. But their euphoria lasted mere seconds. A retaliatory volley reduced their tanks to twisted scrap metal. The rest of the Japanese tanks never even got that chance. Their shells bounced harmlessly off the Sherman's frontal armor like peas off a wall. To penetrate, they needed a side or rear shot, which meant closing in dangerously close. And under overwhelming American air and artillery superiority, that was tantamount to suicide. The remnants of the 7th Regiment, 34 tanks out of 60, retreated to the village of San Manuel. There, the Americans demonstrated how an industrial superpower wages war. They didn't rush infantry into frontal assaults. No, they paused. For 5 long days, aircraft circled overhead. From the sea, battleships and cruisers pounded the Japanese positions. From land, field artillery methodically churned the earth square by square. This wasn't combat, it was systematic annihilation. The goal? Leave no stone unturned. Only at dawn on the 26th of January, when nothing remained of the Japanese defenses but memories, did the Shermans finally advance. Closing to point-blank range, they picked off the surviving, charred Japanese tanks like targets on a firing range. By evening, only 7 tanks remained. And then, those last samurai made their choice. They fired up their engines, rolled out of cover, and launched their final banzai charge. Militarily, it wasn't even an attack. It was a ritual, a gesture of despair and loyalty to the emperor. All perished. Meanwhile, other Japanese commanders chose a different path. The commander of the 10th Tank Regiment, devastated by relentless carrier-based airstrikes, issued an unthinkable order by Japanese standards: abandon your tanks. Escape on foot through the jungle. It was a rational, almost European approach: preserve soldiers' lives for future battles. But in the Japanese army, such conduct was often seen as dishonorable. Yet the fiercest and most epic armored clash erupted in the town of Manaus. There, the 6th Japanese Tank Regiment had moved in. On the 27th of January, American infantry attempted a swift assault but were repulsed. Then the hunt began. American fighter bombers and ground attack planes from forward airfields dominated the skies all day long, tracking every movement, every shadow of a tank. Japanese tank crews dared not even start their engines for fear of giving away their position with smoke. On the 30th, the Americans attacked again, this time backed by Shermans. The town was encircled. Only 20 Japanese tanks remained. For a week, they held out in the pocket with no hope of reinforcement. Only then, when the situation grew utterly hopeless, came the order: withdraw. They attempted a nighttime breakout, lights off, crushing their own wounded under tracks, charging through a storm of fire from every weapon imaginable. Machine guns, cannons, mortars, the Americans knew exactly where they'd go. It wasn't a breakout, it was a slaughterhouse. Only 1 in 5 survived. And all this against just Company C of the 44th American Tank Battalion. An Army newspaper later dubbed this night engagement the hottest tank battle in the Pacific. Picture the scene. A tropical night lit by shell bursts, revealing mangled tanks. Cries in Japanese and English blending into a chaotic melee around burning wrecks. At dawn, American tankers beheld a gruesome sight: 10 medium and 1 light Japanese tanks smoldering before their lines, along with trucks and 245 dead Japanese soldiers. Company C lost 1 killed, 11 wounded, and 2 disabled tanks. The numbers speak for themselves. This wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. The final act of Luzon's armored drama played out in April, as Americans closed in on the Japanese Army headquarters in Baguio. Yamashita had only 5 tanks left, 3 mediums and 2 lights. He then issued the most chilling order in armored warfare history: convert tanks into suicide weapons. Massive explosive charges were bolted to the front armor of 2 vehicles. Their mission: drive straight up to a Sherman and detonate, taking the American crew with them. According to Japanese reports, they destroyed 2 Shermans. The crews of these kamikaze tanks, crawling from the flaming wreckage, charged American infantry with cold steel in hand, dying as their code demanded. But friends, all this was merely a prelude to true hell, hell by the name of Manila. While Yamashita's tanks burned in the fields, a separate tragedy unfolded in the Philippine capital, one pitting not just 2 armies against each other, but 2 entirely different philosophies of duty. MacArthur was desperate to capture Manila quickly for several reasons. First, thousands of American POWs captured back in 42 languished there, their fate uncertain. Second, the city teemed with civilians, roughly 800,000 souls. Third, liberating the capital would send a powerful symbolic message, rekindling hope among Filipinos. And what of the Japanese? Paradoxically, General Yamashita, the very tiger, did not want to defend Manila. He saw it as a trap, a sprawling, exposed metropolis impossible to hold. His plan remained unchanged: withdraw troops into the mountains and abandon the city. But as so often happens in history, human ambition and the peculiarities of Japan's military machine intervened. In Japan, the army and navy despised each other. They were virtually 2 separate states, 2 rival cults. Defense of Manila fell not to an army general, but to a naval officer, Rear Admiral Sanji Iwabuchi, once captain of the battleship Kirishima, sunk by Americans near Guadalcanal way back in '42. For a samurai, losing one's ship meant eternal disgrace. Admiral Iwabuchi saw Manila as his final chance, to redeem his honor and die gloriously in battle, rather than skulk through mountains obeying some army general. He barricaded himself in the city with roughly 4,000 soldiers and 15,000 sailors. Imagine. 15,000 sailors, men who'd never fought on land, who'd never dug a trench or faced infantry assault or tank duels, thrown headlong into an urban meat grinder. And their sole tank? An old American M3 Stuart captured from the Yankees themselves back in '42. With this motley crew, Iwabuchi resolved to defend Manila to the last bullet, the last man, heedless of casualties, whether his own or civilian. This collision course, MacArthur racing to save the city, Iwabuchi condemning it to destruction, led to one of the Pacific War's most horrific battles. Knowing Japanese tanks might appear, the Americans took precautions. Alongside Sherman battalions, they brought M10 Wolverine tank destroyers armed with potent 76mm guns. Yet ironically, they proved nearly useless. Sherman guns could pierce Japanese tank armor from 1.5 to 2 kilometers away. American M10 crews filed astonishing reports. Our armor-piercing round passed clean through the Japanese tank and detonated 20 meters beyond. Imagine that power. They quickly switched to high-explosive shells. Those, hitting Japan's tin cans, simply blew them apart from the inside like open sardine tins. Wolverine losses throughout the entire campaign were laughable. 1 drowned, 1 hit a mine. Meanwhile, chaos reigned in Manila. On the 3rd of February, tankers from that same 44th Battalion executed a lightning thrust. Avoiding prolonged engagements, they raced at top speed through Japanese checkpoints and reached Santo Tomas University, where nearly 4,000 POWs endured appalling conditions. Their liberation became a bright ray in this darkness. Then came the clearing operations. Street fighting, the ultimate nightmare for any army. Tanks in cities aren't breakthrough weapons, they're targets. Ambushed from rooftops, basements, sewer grates. American tankers wrote in after-action reports, "This was an entirely new kind of warfare. We served as mobile artillery, firing point-blank at buildings from stationary positions. The Japanese, especially Iwabuchi's sailors, fought with the fanaticism of the doomed. They mined everything. Mines hidden under trash, inside corpses, amid rubble. One sapper's slightest mistake, and a Sherman exploded skyward. But the gravest threats came from infantry weapons. Grenade launchers, Molotov cocktails, and suicide bombers with pole-mounted mines. Japanese soldiers would leap from alleys, sprint right up to a tank, and either hurl a bottle into its engine compartment or detonate a mine directly on its hull. On the 7th of February, one American tanker scribbled just 3 words in his diary: "Manila is burning." Everything burned, the city, the tanks, all hope. MacArthur, trying to spare civilians, forbade heavy artillery and aerial bombing in the city center. Noble intentions, but they backfired horribly. American infantry and tanks had to storm every house, every street head-on, suffering grievous losses. Meanwhile, the Japanese, holed up in thick Spanish-era stone walls of Intramuros, turned every mansion into a fortress. 75mm Sherman shells merely left black scorch marks on those walls. One of the bloodiest sights was the old police station. Its assault cost the 754th Tank Battalion 3 burned-out Shermans. Another was the so-called German House. After lengthy artillery preparation, as tanks and infantry advanced, the lead Sherman hit a mine, stalled, and was instantly drenched in Molotov cocktails. The crew burned alive. The Battle of Manila ended on the 3rd of March, 1945. The city lay in ruins, more devastated than Warsaw. Casualty figures are staggering. Americans, 1,010 dead, 5,565 wounded. Japanese, approximately 16,000 killed. But the most horrifying number? Civilian deaths. Roughly 100,000 Filipinos perished, under bombardment, in fires, but mostly at the hands of Admiral Iwabuchi's troops. In the defense's final days, driven mad by rage and impending doom, the Japanese committed wholesale slaughter, murdering, raping, burning alive tens of thousands. This atrocity entered history as the Manila Massacre. Admiral Iwabuchi achieved his samurai death. He committed seppuku. General Yamashita, who opposed this bloodbath but failed to prevent it, stood trial after the war and was hanged as a war criminal for Manila's destruction and its people's deaths. So what was this, friends? A pivotal battle for the Philippines? Yes, but it was far more than a fight over territory. It was a collision of truths. Yamashita's pragmatic yet ruthless strategy, Iwabuchi's blind, fanatical code of honor, MacArthur's drive to rescue and liberate, which led instead to a prolonged, ghastly meat grinder. And at the center of it all, tens of thousands of ordinary people whose lives became bargaining chips in generals' and admirals' grand game. The story of Japanese tanks on Luzon is one of futility. Sent as sacrificial lambs, they perished having inflicted almost no damage. Their thin armor and weak guns were anachronisms in a war Japan had already lost, not on battlefields but in shipyards and factories. It's the clearest proof that technological and industrial superiority decides everything. Courage, fanaticism, willingness to die, all shatter against steel, fuel, and mass production. And the story of Manila stands as an eternal warning of what happens when military necessity clashes with humanity. When the desire to save a city leads to its utter annihilation. When one man's code of honor costs 100,000 others their lives. That's history for you. Not black and white, but blood red, shrouded in smoke and echoing with clanking tracks. If you've watched this far, you're a true history lover. And since you're with us, let's keep this journey going. Drop a comment below. Which other forgotten or controversial World War II battle would you like us to dissect with this same depth and honesty? Your ideas fuel our next expedition. And of course, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, so you never miss our next historical investigation. Until we meet again, in the past.